again. I would like to welcome Dr. Pappas for this presentation that is tentatively entitled with Solving Linguistic Puzzles. Dr. Pappas, I hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Bettina. I'd like to welcome everyone who is participating in this e-lecture. Bettina read out my research interests, but today's lecture is about something that's very close to my teaching interest, and that is using extensive writing in my courses in order to get students to understand the material better and be able to apply it better in their own research. These are the what are known as the writing intensive courses, and so today I want to give you an example of how this course works. It's also a good course to showcase because it's the course that builds on the knowledge that students get from our Introduction to Linguistics course. So it is the course that one would take right after they take Introduction to Linguistics, and they're like, oh, linguistics is a fun topic to learn about. Then you go into a more in-depth analysis of what linguists do. Now, for the fall, of course, we have a new environment of learning, new methods, what we are calling remote instruction. And I want to tell you a little bit about this blended model that linguistics will be following for the most part. It's a model that delivers most of the material online through Canvas, and here you see a Canvas page, but also has some online meetings like the present one through Canvas. Again, for most researchers, there's a tab down here, if you can see it, called BB Collaborate Ultra, and it basically opens a nifty little Zoom session where students and professors interact, and it's very handy. In the material suite that's delivered online, I and my colleagues use this technique of scaffolding things through modules. So basically, modules are small units that might contain like a 15-minute lecture on audio with PowerPoint slides, and then a small quiz or some kind of other work that needs to be done. And in order to get to the second module, you have to do the first one. And then, of course, there are a lot of assignments that need to get done so that you can progress. And so the whole idea is that whereas a regular face-to-face course might have 2 midterms and a final, or 1 midterm and a final, these online courses might have 10 quizzes that are worth just a few points each, and then 5 or 6 assignments that are worth a few more points, and so it all builds up like that. And in general, there are no big graded finals or assignments, again, depending on the size of the course. So as you can see, I'm almost done teaching this course because it's an intersession, so an only 6-week course that delivers the same amount of material as a 13-week course. And there's 10 modules and lots of quizzes and assignments and so forth. So it's all meant to give students a good pace through the course, not to let things fall out, because it's kind of difficult to keep on top of everybody's progress without the aid of these electronic tools when you don't have those regular meetings in the classroom or even office hours where students and professors can interact. So now I'm going to switch to my lecture. And we're going to be talking about morphology, so how words are formed and identified in a foreign language. It won't be a technical or detailed course, just an overview of ideas and how writing can help us do this work of identification. But I want to give you a brief overview of linguistics first. So before I start this, I want to ask my first poll questions. My first poll question. Yes, Bettina, can you put it through or?
Simply respond, you have a minute, more or less. All right, so perhaps not everybody, the students may not want to respond. It's half-half, Panos. Let's show the results. Here are the results. So it's 47 to 53.
Okay. Let's ask the second question.
Okay. Let me just go to poll number 2. Here we go.
Oh, it's not Norm, it's Noam.
Oh, sorry. No, my mistake. I just did it 5 seconds ago. All right. Let's share the results. Here we go. So you have perhaps some people in there who have
Great.
already
So
taken the class.
Noam Chomsky is probably the world's most famous linguist. So even though some people haven't taken a linguistics course before, and that's not uncommon because linguistics is not regularly taught in high schools, they still have heard of Noam Chomsky, and so might have heard what linguists do, even in a peripheral way. Now, so what is linguistics? Linguistics is the scientific study of language, and the precise object of our study is the subconscious knowledge of language rules that are never explicitly formulated. So here I'd like Bettina to ask not the third question, but the fourth question about what linguists do.
All right, everybody has
Great.
voted?
That everybody got this right, which is very encouraging because usually when I tell people I'm a linguist, they say to me, oh, I better watch what I say because then you'll correct me, which is a misunderstanding of what linguists do. There's a difference between sort of a linguist who studies language as a scientific object and language pundits, people who make it their job, and sometimes quite a lucrative one, of telling everybody how language should be used. And I'd like to finish up this first part of the polling, Bettina, with the third question, just to see what people's ideas are. This is great. Again, we have a very knowledgeable audience. The second thing people ask linguists is how many languages do they speak? There's a difference between a polyglot and a linguist. A polyglot is somebody who is very fluent in languages and has an ability to pick them up. Not all linguists are polyglots, but some linguists are polyglots. Obviously, people who can learn languages easily are kind of interested in linguistics. So when we're talking about studying language as linguists, we're talking about studying these very fundamental knowledge faculty that humans have. And I say fundamental because notice that a child that's learning the English language, for example, does not need to be told that the subject of a sentence needs to be placed first. They pick that up very quickly. And at the same time, a child learning Greek knows very quickly that you don't need to put a subject in a Greek sentence because the verb covers that information. And also, even though parents do correct their children a lot, and I think mistakenly, they don't need to correct them. Like mostly I hear it with verb tenses, right? You know, my daughter likes to say, um, uh, I was teached that instead of I was taught that. Um, there are, these are only small aspects, and most children produce language, uh, copious amounts of language without any error. So you'll never hear a child making a mistake such as in the park with the ball, play my friends. It's just, it doesn't happen. So we say that the science of linguistics is a descriptive science, not a prescriptive one. And in our introductory course, we cover the major components of language in order to give students an understanding of what exactly is it that we know when we know a language. So we cover the sounds of languages, including English, but not only English, and what knowledge of sounds people have. So if you're a speaker of English, you are not aware of the sound r, which a Greek or French speaker might know, but you are aware and can use the sound sh, which a Greek speaker doesn't know. We know how sounds fit together, because not all languages have the same rules for putting together sounds. So Prv is a possible sequence in Serbian or Croatian, but it's not a possible sequence in English. We know how to make words. So everyone knows that you say unimportant and you never say inimportant, but you have to say impossible and you never say impossible. So, and these are things that nobody's taught you. Nobody sat you down and say, okay, here's how you say that something is negative. You just pick that up and you form those rules very quickly. Now, second language learners might take more time to do that, but in their first language, they didn't have any problem picking up similar rules. Of course, we learned how to use words in sentences. So for example, not to say in the park with the ball, play my friends, but to say my friends play in the park with the ball. And then we learned how to figure out the meaning of sentences and how meaning might change because of context, which is a very dynamic and fluid approach. A typical example is that if somebody walks into a room and says, oh my God, it's cold in here, people don't just say, yep, it's cold, thank you very much. Somebody might, most likely will understand that this is a request to close a window to turn up the heat or something like that. So it's where the meaning of the literal meaning of the sentence and the actual request are very loosely connected. So we use a specific technique of teaching linguistic analysis, which is based on data sets that have hidden patterns in them. And we teach students how to observe these patterns, how to describe them, and how to analyze them, because through the analysis of these patterns, we get to these subconscious rules of knowledge of language that I was talking about. And over the past 5 years, we're implementing a specific pedagogy called writing in the discipline, in which we are demystifying writing, debunking myths about writing, and trying to change students' habits about writing. And the biggest one is that writing is not separated from the process of learning. Some people think that you learn, and once you've learned a whole bunch of stuff, you begin to write. And we try at every step of the way to teach students how writing is an invaluable tool for every step of the learning process. I'm going to have to take that quick break now, Bettina, and I will be
taking over.
in 2 minutes.
Just a quick, we would like to use, in fact, this opportunity, and I have spoken to Hannah before time. So Hannah is a student in the Department of Linguistics. Perhaps, Hannah, you can tell us a little bit about your pathway in linguistics, and then perhaps mostly also about what the Linguistic Student Union is doing.
Yeah, so I am the current president of the Linguistic Student Union. We also have Taylor Goff here, who is the FASS representative for the union as well, if she wants to chime in. Um, what I did to get into linguistics was I actually got into SFU from high school into the communications department, which is an FCAT, not even in FASS. And around second year or so, I took an elective course in linguistics that was for one of my breath courses, your WQBs. And ironically, I found that the material in that course in particular, which is Ling 160, Intro to Social Linguistics, was a lot more, shall we say, intuitive. The stuff I was talking about in that course were conversations that I'd already been having on a regular basis in my daily life, and I thought, hey, I can make a degree out of this, and the things that I study don't have to feel so foreign to me or super unrelated to my daily life. Great, okay, how do we do this? So I transferred like the next term immediately and jumped right in, and am now a linguistics major with a minor in education instead.
Taylor, would you like to talk to your own pathway, perhaps?
Yeah, for sure. My pathway to linguistics is a little bit kind of roundabout, just a little bit. So my entire life, I've had this question in my mind, like, what's the history of language, and like, how did languages get to be the way they are, and really having an interest in how people use language. And I actually started my university career as a biology major, because I also really love science, and especially like human biology. But I found that after a while, biology didn't quite agree with me, especially organic chemistry. And so I found myself then switching to a different major, Asian studies. I really got interested in Asian history and culture after taking a class. But one thing that always kind of interested me specifically about Asian culture is Korean culture, and in particular Korean language. And I always still had this thought in my mind, like, oh, how Korean language works, and just having this love and passion for languages. I've had the privilege of learning over my lifetime about 5 other languages. So I've always loved language. And then finally, and in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, okay, maybe I'll transfer to SFU for linguistics, when I found out what linguistics was about. And so after I finished my degree at Langara, it was natural for me to just want to come to SFU and do linguistics. And the first course I took was sociolinguistics, Ling 160. And it was just like the most amazing class. Like, I'd always been interested in how, different cultures use language, and how, we use language to express ourselves in different ways. And I had the most amazing prof for it. So I was like, this is definitely for me. I love linguistics. I'm a huge language nerd. So that's how I got here. I also discovered this amazing YouTube channel called Native Lang, and he makes all these like animated videos about different aspects of language and cool like linguistic features that other languages have. And so coupled with that, I was like, I love linguistics. I'm almost done my second last semester, and yeah. And I also have my certificate in teaching ESL. I did the TESOL certification program. And my hope after I graduate is to teach English in South Korea. So that is me.
That is great. Thank you so much for sharing. I see that Dr. Pappas is back. All good. Panos, do you want to share your screen again and continue your lecture?
Yes, I will do that.
Super. You may want to put it on presentation mode. Oops, no.
It's
Yep.
okay, yeah. So the best way to begin teaching people about linguistic analysis is to look at words, because we all have an innate understanding what a word is, even though the definition for it is not always straightforward. For example, if I ask you, is be a word, you will understand something like the insect or the verb to be or not to be, but you're not going to understand just the sound be as being a word, maybe even the letter, but not just the sound. Also, you know that small differences in form can really make something a word or not. So we all know that blogs is a word, even though it's a very recent word. But then everybody knows that blugs is not a word. So, you know, why should just one sound make such a big difference? And as I like to joke with my computers, with my students, figuring out what a word is so easy that even a computer can do it. Because obviously a computer is not as intelligent or flexible as a human. So how do we go about identifying words in another language? The core of the basic linguistic analysis is this tool that we call a minimal pair. And it describes a pair of items where there's only one difference between them. It's not a linguistic tool, it's a logic tool that we use in linguistics. And it's this pairing of a form and a meaning to create what's a 4-cell matrix provides us with the ability to identify the differing form with the differing meaning. So just start with something in English. You look at I see versus you see. This gives us the information that I means the speaker in English, so the first person, whereas you means the addressee, what we call the second person. So as you can see here, this is a 2x2 matrix where you have the two foreign forms, even though here we're talking about English, and then what their meaning is. And by crossing out the parts that are the same, then you can identify the equivalence between the parts that are different. And as I want you to try for yourselves, you can apply the same method in identifying words in another language, although it's not as easy as it would be obviously for your own language. So this is the a good example of what kind of work I ask my students to do, even if they've had no extensive linguistic experience before, is to look at this very small set of Greek data and try to figure out what each word means by starting off by finding the one and only minimal pair that exists here and using it to figure out word by word. It's a repetitive process that I will showcase for you in a sec. But first, I'd like you to struggle with the data a little bit. And so we have a poll question for this, which Bettina can put up now. And you should be fair and not try to figure out by Googling what the word is.
I think most of them have voted. I will stop it now.
Okay, and most of them got it right. It's true. The correct translation of Milice is talked. But I want to show you on a different slide deck how we can know that this is, how can we be 100% certain that this is correct? What if we encountered an alien civilization, somebody who communicated in a language that we never had before, how would we go about analyzing that? So just give me a sec. I'll stop the sharing and I'll return in a sec. Okay, so this is the data set, and the solution is you have to find at least one minimal pair. Sometimes if it's a big data set, there'll be more than one minimal pairs, and then you kind of have to do all of them, but that's a complicated thing that I don't want to go into. Now, just for semiology, I'm using red font to indicate the things that are standing out because of things existing in a minimal pair. And the other thing that's very important is that you always have to solve for the unknown language, right? You can't solve for the English language, because English is not sort of God's language or the world's most normal language. In fact, I like to tell people that English is a very exotic language. And we know that because it has the world's hardest R, and it has probably the world's most complicated vowel system. Most of the world's vowel systems have 5 vowels. It's considered really rare to have 9, and English has 13. And that's why all the different dialects of English, people have different vowels, from British English to Canadian English to US Southern English to Australian and New Zealand English. So always focus on the original language, not the translation. So as I said, there's only one minimal pair, and it's the sentence, the girl talked with the boy versus the girl sang with the boy. And here you can see one of the first problems that we have in doing linguistic analysis. There's no guarantee that the words are going to be in the same position. So Greek likes to put the verb first, English likes to put it second. So if we just took word order, we'd be, completely wrong. But by establishing the minimal pair and saying, well, the Greek is different only because of these 2 forms, and the English is different only because of these 2 forms, therefore, μίλησε must mean talked, and τραγούδισε must mean sang. Now, the second step is that you replace what you don't know with what you have found out. So this time I use green font to replace all the instances in which I have usage of the words for talk and sing. And you can see that by doing that, it creates new minimal pairs. Because once you know something, then the next forms can become minimal pairs. And so these 2 middle sentences, μίλησε το αγόρι, the boy talked, and τραγούδισε το παιδί, the child sang, become a minimal pair that allows us to solve for the words αγόρι and παιδί, right? Notice that it's a very structured way of doing it. It's not fancy writing. It's just very straightforward, kind of like scientific report writing. And I like to really bring this home. Linguistics is a science. There really is no art to it at this level. You are doing a thought experiment, but just like any other experiment, the method has to be the same, and the report has to follow the steps of the method. So if we take these 2 sentences with what we have found and we turn them green because we have solved for them, then through the process of elimination, we can also figure out what this other little word, to, which in Greek is pronounced to, means, and that is that it means the. It's the definite article. So now, if we use green font to replace everything that we know about, you see that it's mostly green, and very little is still black or unknown. And in the last sentence, there's only one thing left that's unknown, the me on the Greek side and with on the English side. And so me must mean with. And if we go ahead and do another replacement, we get one sentence in which the only unknown word is κορίτσι, And of course, this is girl in the English side and English side. And so we can solve for that as well. Now, the key thing here is that this is a small data set, and maybe it's almost like, well, why do we have to use this process? I could have probably guessed it. You know, I could have gotten a 99% guess, like most people did. Well, English language data sets are not just 5 sentences. They can be 5,000 sentences. They can be hundreds of thousands of words and different forms within words. Like any of you who have taken French or Spanish know that, okay, you might know the word for talk, but then I talk is different from you talk, is different from they talk. And trying to analyze the hidden pattern behind that needs this kind of rigorous scientific approach. Otherwise, there's no way to come with that. French is especially difficult because on the surface, it looks like it's all the same. But if you start digging underneath and comparing forms to one another, you see that you have to posit forms that are different in sort of the mental abstraction, and then have other rules that end up making them all look the same. So if you take a word like vivre, to live, the first 3 persons, I mean, I, you, and it, they all appear the same, but when you conduct a linguistic analysis of them, it turns out that their dictionary forms, their vocabulary forms are quite different. And that's what's intriguing about linguistics, right? You have a knowledge system that sees differences and sameness and can keep track of them, and at the same time sees patterns and differences and can track them, right? So if you think of all the different forms that a verb can have in French or in Finnish or in some other language that has a very rich morphology, and yet people know that it's the same verb, that it has that same meaning. That is an amazing power of computation. It's not random. It's not simply probability. And so it's not you know, an accident that linguistics plays such a big role in these very cutting edge technologies like artificial intelligence. I mean, there are things such as, you know, can you make robots move, and can a robot put together IKEA furniture, right? But very intrinsic to these questions of artificial intelligence is also, can a robot speak? Because it's that kind of complex analysis, not just of a preset pattern, but also of how a conversation develops between 2 people. So, you know, the ability to create chatbots or virtual assistants for different companies, we've all seen how much they've exploded in use lately, but they're still at the embryonic stage of the ability to do what the human brain can do. I heard somebody, as I was coming up, talk about linguistics, right? And it's amazing that it's not just meaning that we carry through our language, but we also carry a lot of information about our social background, our political views about the world, our class, our gender, our sexuality, all these different things. And the fact that we are able to produce them, and the listeners are able to pick up on those interpretations, just shows you what a rich system of combinatorics language really is. So that's all I had to share with you guys today, just to give you a brief but substantial taste of what linguistics work is. And I'm happy to take your questions if you have any.